Colossians chapter 4. Imagine for a moment that every interaction you have today is part of a grand tapestry being woven by God. That smile you give to a stranger, the encouragement you offer to a coworker, the prayer you whisper for a loved one. All of these seemingly small moments are opportunities for eternal impact. Now, in this chapter, Paul challenges us to live with intention, faith, and love in all that we do. He reminds us that no moment is too small for God to use, and no person is insignificant in the work of His kingdom. So today, let's dive into this powerful chapter and discover how we can make every moment count for Christ. Devote yourself to prayer. So Paul starts this chapter with an invitation to the heart of Christian living, prayer. He writes, "Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful." So Paul doesn't ask us to pray occasionally or when life gets tough. He calls us to be devoted, persistent, and intentional. Why? Because prayer is how we stay connected to God's will and power in our lives. Now, what does this look like? Well, being watchful, this means staying spiritually alert. Just as a watchman guards a city, we guard our hearts by being aware of what God is doing around us and within us. Ask yourself, where is God moving in my life? How can I join Him? And then there's being thankful. And we know that gratitude does shift our perspective. Even in challenges, even in our challenges, our life challenges, thanking God for His presence and provision reminds us of His faithfulness. So Paul also asks for specific prayers, for doors to open so that he can proclaim the mystery of Christ clearly. Now, this reminds us to pray not just for ourselves, but for others, especially for those sharing the gospel. So think of it this way. Make prayer a daily rhythm. Perhaps it's starting your morning with gratitude, or pausing at midday to seek God's guidance, or ending your evening reflecting on His goodness, or all three. Paul transforms ordinary days into extraordinary opportunities for connecting with God. Make the most of every opportunity. So next, Paul shifts from prayer to action, saying, "Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." Now, here, this is a call to live out our faith in every interaction, especially with those who may not know Christ. Paul gives us two specific ways to do this. He says, living wisely. Well, living wisely means being intentional in how we act and speak. People are always watching how we handle stress, respond to conflict, and how we treat others. Are we reflecting Christ in those moments? I'll give you an example. Do we show patience when someone is rude? Do we prioritize honesty and integrity in our decisions? Do we act with kindness even when it's inconvenient? And he also mentions speaking graciously. And Paul describes gracious speech as being seasoned with salt. Now, salt enhances flavor and preserves. Our words should do the same. So we should enhance and speak words that uplift, encourage, and inspire. Think about how your words can bring joy and hope. And preserve. We should avoid gossip, criticism, or negativity. Instead, use your speech to build others up and point them to truth. Now think about that for a minute. Take a moment to think about your daily interactions at work, with friends, or even online. How can you use your words and actions to show Christ's love? It's not about grand gestures, though sometimes a simple word of encouragement can change someone's day. Keep that in mind. The power of teamwork in ministry. So, in the final verses of this chapter, Paul lists several people who have partnered with him in ministry. Titus, Onesimus, Aristarchus, Mark, Epaphras, and others. And while their names may not be familiar to us, their contributions were essential. Now, what can we learn from that? Well, first, we need each other. Paul didn't work alone. He surrounded himself with a community of believers who supported and encouraged him. This reminds us that we're not called to live out our faith in isolation. God places people in our lives to walk alongside us. And every role matters. Each person Paul mentions had a unique role. Tychicus delivered letters. Epaphras prayed fervently for others. Even Onesimus, a former slave, became a vital part of the ministry. And this shows us that no act of service is too small in God's kingdom. So think about that for a minute. Consider the people in your life today. Friends, family, church members. How can you support one another in living out your faith? And what role can you play in God's work? Maybe it's serving in your local church, or encouraging someone who's struggling, or simply being a faithful friend. They all matter. A final reminder, remember my chains. So Paul ends this letter with a deeply personal note. Remember my chains. Now, this isn't a plea for pity, but a call to focus on the bigger picture. Paul endured imprisonment, hardship, and persecution, yet his faith never wavered. He reminds us that following Christ requires perseverance and a willingness to sacrifice for the sake of the gospel. So ask yourself, are you willing to trust God even when life is hard? And how can you use your challenges as a testimony of His faithfulness? Good questions. So as we close, let's reflect on what Paul has taught us in Colossians chapter 4. To pray intentionally, stay connected to God, watchful of His work, and thankful in all circumstances. Seize every opportunity. Let your actions and words reflect Christ's love, making every moment count. Embrace community. Recognize the value of working together and encouraging one another in faith. Persevere in faith. Remember that even in challenges, God is with us, and our lives can be a powerful testimony. So, my friends, as you go about your week, I want to challenge you to view every moment as an opportunity to live for Christ. Whether it's a conversation with a stranger, a prayer for a friend, or an act of kindness, know that God can use you in extraordinary ways. Let's leave here today ready to make every moment count for His glory. And before we step away today, I'd like to offer a prayer for the intentions and hopes that you currently hold in your heart. You ready? I'll lead. Here we go. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. That was beautiful. And look, you're here still, and I get to see you again today. I love that. You know, I look for you every day, and I'm glad that you're here. I'll be back tomorrow with 1 Thessalonians. We're moving on to a new chapter. It's going to be beautiful. There's going to be lessons for us, things we can learn, and I guarantee you there's going to be a little magic in the Word that's going to make our lives just a little bit better, maybe a whole lot better. I tell you what, I'm looking forward to seeing what we can learn from the passage, and I hope you are too. So I'll see you tomorrow. I hope you have a beautiful day. Oops, almost forgot. Hug your family. They love you. And I'll be back tomorrow. Take care, friends.